Hi, this is Chris Gabbitas, Artistic Director of Phoenix Chorale, and I'm excited to be joined today by the Musical Director of MusicaNova, Warren Cohen. Welcome, Warren.
Glad to be here.
The reason we're having a chat and sending this out onto the airwaves is that very excitingly, in March 2025, we are collaborating our respective musical forces to come together for a couple of performances across the weekend of the 8th and the 9th of March. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how this project came to be, why we're collaborating, a bit about the repertoire, and a bit about how you can come and experience this as our wonderful patrons and friends. So, Warren, I think, wasn't it you who contacted Phoenix Chorale to see about this initially?
Yes, initially it came from our board chairman, Robert Ledger, and this had come about because I think I had probably casually mentioned at some point that I would love to do a couple of that I had a couple of big choral works in particular that I'd love to do, and we hadn't collaborated with a chorus in quite some time, and of course Phoenix Chorale is the the best choir, the best chorus in available in Phoenix, and you've done some absolutely wonderful music. So I thought it would be you'd be the people who we would most like to collaborate with, and Robert initiated it, and everything went remarkably smoothly from there.
Well, thank you for your kind words. It's wonderful to have so many great musicians in a great city such as Phoenix. And so you don't collaborate with choruses very often. Tell us a bit more about Musica Nova, about the history and how you perform at the moment.
MusicaNova was started in 2003, and the basic premise of the organization was we talked about certain ideas about how we wanted our repertoire done. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to do new music, we wanted to do neglected music, we wanted to do suppressed music. And when we did more standard repertoire, we wanted to put a new twist on it. We wanted it to contextualize it in a way where it would sound different than it would otherwise. Give you an example. We once did Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, and we did it in collaboration with Morton Gould's Tap Dance Concerto. And the idea being that because of the fact that the idea of dance is so central to Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, we wanted to contextualize it in that way. Suppressed music has been a big thing. Music that has been by composers who have had less success because they have been effectively suppressed for one reason or another. And also music that has been unfairly neglected because of all sorts of reasons. Therefore, we've ended up doing a lot more music, perhaps than other groups by women. We've done more music by minority composers. This particular collaboration, we're doing one by a quasi-minority composer. Coleridge-Taylor was half black, so I guess we could call him, a half minority. And his music has, of course, being an example of that. His music was very popular in his own lifetime, but a lot of it has basically faded out since, and there's been a revival of interest in his music in recent years. So that basically has been the way in which we've done stuff. Presently, we do most of our concerts at the Musical Instruments Museum in Phoenix, which is an absolutely wonderful venue.
Mm.
Um, we once did a concert in a Camelback Bible Church, which is where we're doing this one, in 2005. So it's been 20 years since we've actually played in that space, and it's a little different than it was back then.
Well, I'm hoping that in
And
listening
yeah,
to this, people who perhaps may not know about Musica Nova, wonderful band of instruments, and as Warren says, performing music which is neglected or by perhaps less popular composers or suppressed composers throughout the years, as well as very contemporary music as well. Right on your doorstep in Phoenix, in Arizona, there's this fantastic group, and so we hope that we can support each other's patron bases through coming together and making music. And interestingly, what you said about suppressed or neglected composers, whilst we don't necessarily have that specific mission with Phoenix Chorale, something which we're attempting to do more and more is to juxtapose more well-known, more famous, more well-performed works, I suppose, with musical curiosities, music which deserves to see the light of day more often than it does. And so a few years ago, you'll know that we put together Handel's great Dixit Dominus oratorio
Yeah,
motet, together with Sarah Kirkland Snyder's Mass for the Endangered, a beautiful contemporary work which speaks to the ecology of our planet and climate change. And then last year we put together Mozart's Requiem together with The Lost
mhm,
Bird, another piece uh,
yeah,
dealing with ecology by Christopher Tin, contemporary Asian American composer. And when we started talking about this project that we're putting together, I think the programming fell into place very, very smoothly because I think you very much came with this idea of wanting to do the Coleridge-Taylor, and you're absolutely right. I mean, undoubtedly he was seen as a minority and probably still should be because even being half black British composer, um, sadly, this was during the days turn of the 19th, 20th centuries when anything different was seen as being other. And Coleridge-Taylor
yeah.
grew up as a contemporary of Sir Edward Elgar, incredibly famous, prominent white composer. And Coleridge-Taylor died relatively young. But if you look at the output of Elgar and Coleridge-Taylor during their equivalent lifespan, I would say Coleridge-Taylor probably matches, if not even slightly surpasses
Yeah.
Elgar with the volume and quality of his output. So the huge sadness is we can't ever know what great heights Coleridge-Taylor may have gone to. And it's only right and proper that we acknowledge his efforts and his work and his place amongst prominent British composers of any background, creed, or color. But which is the exact piece that we're going to be collaborating on this time?
It's called A Tale of Old Japan, and this was an oratorio that he wrote in the last year of his life. He died at 37, so he died very young. Generally, his wife attributed it to overwork because he was trying to make a living. And the really sad part is he could have, in fact, been fairly wealthy because his oratorio Hiawatha was in the first decade of the 20th century. Uh, Besides Handel's Messiah and Mendelssohn's Elijah, the third most performed oratorio in the English speaking world during that decade. And it was enormously, enormously popular and had a secondary revival um, in the 1920s and 30s, where it was done with what would now be considered completely inappropriate costumes and stuff and staging. And so this work became hugely popular. But in a sense, what it did is it tended to overwhelm all of his other music, and his other pieces were not performed nearly as often. And the last, actually, there were three oratorios in that particular one. There were the three Hiawatha ones, but this particular work, he regarded and it as his finest work, A Tale of Old Japan. And it's an interesting piece from a certain point of view because the poem that it's based on is called The Two Painters, A Tale of Old Japan by Alfred Noyes, who is I think best known in the English speaking world for his poem The Highwayman, which I remember having read in middle school. Well, I didn't have middle school in when I was in grade six or grade seven. In Canada, we don't have middle school. And and I remember reading that particular poem. And Noyes was basically known for that poem and a few other things, but he was a friend of Coleridge-Taylor's. And this particular poem has a very, very Victorian sentiment to it. I mean, it has that sort of air of exotica over it that you place with this idea of it being placed in Japan, but it does not suggest anything that what we would consider resembling authentic Japanese culture in any way. It was just kind of a vague stereotype of this idea of these painters and this sad little girl. Some of the things you will know from things such as Madame Butterfly and this sort of exoticism that Puccini had. The thing that Coleridge-Taylor did not do is he did not go into exoticism in the music. It is very much in his own idiom. It is in that late Victorian style that he wrote in. And his music is, I think, striking in several ways. One is for just the sheer beauty of the orchestration, the beauty of the choral. The choral writing's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's perfect. If anybody knows Hiawatha has ever sung in that, it's amazingly perfect. The way in which he combines the two is really beautiful. He had a tremendous melodic sense, and so this, but it was his own voice. And it's an interesting thing because you mentioned Elgar. At the beginning of his career, Elgar was instrumental in getting him started. There was Elgar was supposed to write a piece for the Three Choirs Festival, and he couldn't do it. And he recommended Coleridge-Taylor, who at the time was, I think, 21 years old. And he said he is the finest of the young composers. So there was an actual relationship of sort between Elgar and Coleridge-Taylor, and
That's
that ballade that he wrote, yeah, which is a fantastic piece, an orchestral piece. I've done it many times. And that idea was that he was going to be the rising star of British music. And that didn't really happen, but he did develop. And you could, if you listen to A Tale of Old Japan next to Hiawatha, you could see how he had developed as a composer. It's kind of more integrated. It's a little tighter. The sentiment is still there, and the writing is still there, and it's very very beautiful. Incidentally, Noyes himself said that his setting of it enhanced the poem in ways he could not imagine. So I think that's a fascinating appreciation from the actual writer of the text. He said it's just much better with his music, you know.
I mean, I
And
have to
I
be
think
honest.
that's a remarkable thing.
That is remarkable. I'm not somebody who naturally really enjoys poetry. I mean, my mother is very literary minded, and at school and at home when I was a child, we did used to explore poetry and books very very often. But for me, the only way a poem can come alive is if it's set to music, and there are words which are
Yeah.
achingly beautiful to my mind when set to music. And if I were simply to read them with no musical setting whatsoever, they do absolutely nothing for me. I'm an absolute heathen when it comes to the written word in that sense. And the only books I don't even read the classics. The only books that I really read are very very modern sort of thrillers or easy reading books. I think I think I because I'm a Renaissance music lover. I really delve
Yeah.
into quite extremes of early music. That's my idiosyncrasy. That's my eccentricity. And then when it comes to books, it's lowest common denominator the whole way. But
Yeah.
I think it's lovely if an author or a lyricist or a poet believes that their text is enhanced by music. It's the most beautiful thing. And when I mean you inspired the rest of the program because I thought, well, if we're going to be doing this wonderful tale, which I read, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful text, and the music is fabulous. And we managed to find a recording of this piece. We don't believe it's
Yeah.
commercially recorded, but we found a recording from the University of Kiel in northern England, with quite a stellar lineup of soloists. But it's about 40 years old, and it's a
Yeah.
bit rainy, and but it gives us a good impression of the music. And really, for audience members, if you like that sort of turn of the century Victorian, Edward Elgar, even analogies with, you know, Stephen Foster and that sort of American folk sort of melodic
Mhm.
tradition, the way that the lines move forwards and the rich, lush
Yeah.
harmonies. This is a piece you will enjoy, and it tells a really interesting, charming story. It's a beautiful tale, set in Imperial Japan, and it was this nature of Imperial Japan that made me think, what can I put alongside that perhaps is initially more headline grabbing and which people might be able to relate to immediately. Because what we like to do is draw them in with a piece that they know and then
Yeah.
present a piece that they don't yet know, but which we believe the
Yeah.
audiences will love. We've done it the last 2 years, we're doing it now. And so we're pairing. The program is called Tales of Love and Majesty, and it's Coleridge-Taylor, Taylor of Japan, and also some of Handel's Coronation anthems. And the reason that I chose those is, I mean, I'm a huge lover of Handel, of course, but I thought the imperial juxtaposition of the islands of Japan halfway around the world with the British Isles and this idea of a bit of pomp and pageantry, and love for our monarchy. We do, by and large, we quite like our royal family. We love them in this country, and we do like a good coronation. We had one just a couple of years ago, And so I sort of reverse engineered it. I thought, what can I do which speaks to our sovereignty and our pomp and circumstance in England? And worked backwards from the idea of coronation. Um, we're going to be performing as a bit of a surprise. I'm not telling everybody, but I'll tell you, you faithful people who are watching this, a wonderful piece by Charles Hubert Parry, I Was Glad, which is from the same era as the Coleridge-Taylor, exactly the same era as when
Exactly.
Taylor of Old Japan was written. Parry wrote this wonderful coronation anthem to go alongside earlier Handel coronation anthems. And we've got a really special surprise for the audience in that we're using a very special arrangement of that piece. And that fits very nicely with the Coleridge-Taylor. But in the first half of the performance, we're doing two of Handel's coronation anthems. He wrote four coronation anthems, and we're doing a couple of those, including the most famous, Zadok the Priest. And then alongside that, um, Handel's birthday ode for Queen Anne, which it allows the soloists within our choir to step forward and show their instruments to great effect. And it's some of the most beautiful, I think, courtly, gracious writing that Handel composed during his lifetime. It's in fairly short movements, the birthday ode for
Yeah.
Queen Anne, but it's an absolutely stunning devotional piece of work, really. And so I'm hoping that putting these different pieces and themes side by side will produce a really interesting program for people to enjoy.
Yeah, there's an interesting aspect of that, which is that Coleridge-Taylor regarded himself as thoroughly British. And one of the things he was very disturbed about was when people would say, refer to him as black or something like that, which he also had an interest in his black heritage. But he said he would say something like, "Well, I am an Englishman," with great fervor. And this whole idea, which one of the connections between him and Handel is neither of him were regarded as true Englishmen,
Hmm.
but they both were tremendously English in their own way, and I find that that was an interesting connection that came to my mind when I thought about putting the program together. Handel, of course, was German and had a huge advantage of the fact that they brought in German kings into England, who then uh, promoted Handel more. But he lived the last 35 years of his life in England. I mean, you can go check his house out. It's right there. It's in Westminster, isn't it? In that part of town. And this he became, as he put it himself, I became an old Englishman. And but these idea of them being slightly on the outside of British society and yet also very much identifying with it, I think is an interesting element. And in a way, they identified very important parts of British music for many years. I mean, Handel became the idea of how you were supposed to compose, and then Coleridge-Taylor's music became the inspiration later on for a whole genre of English music, which was English light music in the 1920s and 30s. And if you hear this stuff, like people like Robert Farnon or Albert Coates, these composers, they wrote in a style that's derived in terms of sound and orchestration from Coleridge-Taylor. So I find it very interesting that they had a huge influence on British music, yet were on the edges of British society.
That is fascinating. And I think personally to today's world, it speaks really powerfully towards the importance of integration, immigration,
Yes.
acceptance,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
allowing people to identify with whatever culture and in whatever way that they choose and they please. And I'm hoping that that's something which comes across in the way that we're putting this music together and presenting it to our audiences. Neither Warren nor I live in Phoenix. We are. I'm talking to Warren on the
Right.
east coast of the States, and at the moment I'm in the southeast of England. And I know that we're both traveling across to Phoenix towards the end of March, end of February, beginning of March. And
Yeah.
I know that we can't wait to be there. We look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at these live performances. Of course, you can write to us if you've got any more questions about the repertoire or about the experience. But Um, it's an incredibly underperformed piece, the Coleridge-Taylor, along with some incredibly
Yeah.
almost overperformed pieces, the Handel. So it'll give you a good balance in a performance. And we're so
Right.
excited to have these joining forces of MusicaNova and Phoenix Chorale. And Warren, I so appreciate your time today. Thank you for giving us a bit of insight into the program.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this and to the collaboration. This is going to be a great concert.
Phoenix Chorale and MusicaNova performing in Camelback Bible Church. The title of the program is Tales of Love and Majesty, Handel's Coronation Anthems, and Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, A Tale of Old Japan. 7:30 p.m. in Camelback on Saturday, the 8th of March, and 3 p.m. in Camelback Bible Church on Sunday, the 9th of March. We look forward to seeing you there.